I'm here today because my coach and my father don't want me to blow my ride. So I get treated differently because coach thinks I'm a winner. So does my old man. I'm not a winner because I want to be one. I'm a winner because I got strength and speed. Kind of like a racehorse.
So some of you requested that I do another video on the Breakfast Club. If you're new here, I'm a counsellor and I do film analysis videos that sometimes draw on my counselling and psychoanalysis backgrounds, like I did a video a while back analysing the character Alison from the Breakfast Club and the psychology behind her. Anyway, you all blessed me with support on that video and you suggested I also analyse all the other characters, and I thought, yeah, that's a good idea. So today we're talking about Andrew. I did discuss him a bit in the last video obviously, so I'm not going to repeat the same points I mentioned there. You know, you can watch that video for them. But we're just going to jump right in now because this is going to be long regardless. So let me start by saying one of the things I find interesting about Andrew is how much he acts like a teacher within the group. Not in the wise guru sense, but I mean in the telling people off sense. A teacher in the same way Vernon is a teacher. From the off, we see Bender pissing about, annoying Claire, disrupting and disrespecting everyone, and there's Andrew telling Bender to stop, warning him constantly throughout the first 40-50 minutes of the film.
Hey, you're not urinating in here, man. You whip it out and you're dead before the first drop hits the floor. Hey, if I lose my temper, you're totaled, man. Because you live in here doesn't give you the right to be a pain in the ass, so knock it off! So why don't you just shut up? So let's watch the mouth, huh? You guys keep up your talking and Vernon's gonna come right in here. Come on, Bender, don't screw around. It's very funny. Come on, fix it. You're not gonna blaze up in here.
All these lines sound exactly like the sort of stuff Vernon would say when telling Bender off. So what's this about? Obviously the further we'll go into the video, the more in-depth we'll get about things, but for the moment I'll say there's basically 3 reasons behind his behaviour here. Firstly, it's because, as Alison points out later in the film, he
can't think for himself.
He's sort of conditioned as a person, like a soldier is conditioned to think a certain sort of way. The example Andrew himself uses is that he's like a racehorse, taught to run along a set track at the sound of a pistol. That's it. Andrew's whole life revolves around his wrestling, and his training to get better at wrestling. To be a winner. His dad expects the very best from his son and consequently puts tremendous pressure on Andrew to be strong and to
win! Win! Win!
What that's kind of done to Andrew is leave him lacking a personality or an identity. He is just the racehorse, the wrestler. When you think about it, he's a really bland character throughout most of this film, and that's because all he is a wrestler in his dad's eyes. That's all he's ever been seen as, train hard and win. The rest of the time he doesn't kind of know how to behave because he hasn't really figured out who he is yet. And so, not knowing who he is, he's left with kind of following guidelines on how to behave. And his guidelines is to be the varsity athlete, the role model jock, the hero of the school who will work hard, stand up to bullies and just do the right thing because that will lead to success. In his eyes, people who don't do the right thing are like Bender and they get nowhere in life. People who do the right thing will become successful, like he will. For now, we're sticking with this very clean-cut sense of Andrew, with which he doesn't think they should smoke weed. Even Brian thinks they should smoke weed, but not Andrew, you know? We're sticking with this code of rules approach to living that he has. Just knuckle down, do the right thing, become a successful athlete. Because it is a very rigid set of guidelines. Like I said, he doesn't think for himself, which means he can't really judge morally grey areas or anything. He just follows this protocol, basically, about the right and wrong things to do. The right thing to do is defend Claire like she's a damsel in distress when Bender picks on her. The right thing to do is to call Bender out for not using Brian's name when addressing him.
Yeah, well, he's got a name. Yeah? Yeah. What's your name? Brian. See?
But Andrew didn't know his name either. He's not interested in knowing Brian or caring or actually empathising, it's just addressing people by their name is the right thing to do. But I don't want to get bogged down in this here. The second reason for his telling off approach kinda ties into the first, and it's that this black and white approach to right and wrong partly stems from a winner-loser mentality he has drummed into him. There's the strong and there's the weak, the successful and the failure. It may be that simple and straightforward in the world of sport, but not in all life. However, since the entirety of Andrew's life is sport, that's how he approaches everything. I'll be a winner because I do the right things and train hard. Bender will be a loser because he doesn't. There is no middle ground, either you're a winner or a loser, effectively, hence a very scathing line Andrew delivers to Bender.
You know, Bender, you don't even count. I mean, if you disappear forever, it wouldn't make any difference. He may as well not even exist at this school.
So Andrew tells off Bender and stands up to him all the time because Bender is a loser, Andrew is a winner, and he needs to assert that dominance. Which is the third reason really. The power struggle. A struggle not just about getting Bender to do the right thing, but also about the fight to be group leader. And also they're pretty much fighting over Claire because they both have a thing from her from the beginning. In terms of Andrew, you see it in a moment where he tries to invite her to a party.
It's a big party at Stubby's. Parents are in Europe. Should be pretty wild. Yeah? Yeah, you gonna go?
Bender's approach to win over Claire is through winding her up, effectively, which I guess you can call negging. He's certainly presenting himself as this rough, hard opposite to the pristine Claire.
Not that pristine.
In order to try and pique her curiosity into the unknown kind of thing. That's how he tries to win her, whereas Andrew tries to get on her good side by defending her against Bender's slander, basically. He tries to force Bender into showing her respect, and he's very eager to pull out all sorts of big man threats, relishing the chance for a fight. He kind of tries to goad Bender into fighting. And then when Bender does no more than gently tap him on the arm, he's then reacting hard and pinning Bender to the floor because that helps to assert his dominance. It's all part of the power struggle between them. Not that the power struggle is just, or even predominantly, about Claire. Andrew's life revolves around winning competitions. Of course he wants to compete with Bender. Of course he wants that competition for power because what they do throughout is basically a psychological version of his wrestling. He recognises Bender as this male challenge for Claire, for leadership of the group, or just as someone with a formidable presence that Andrew naturally wants to beat. Since Bender represents the hard, rebellious, disrespectful delinquent, Andrew will beat him by playing the opposite, and winning as the clean-cut, good, heroic figure. Andrew changes in the film though, because, like I've suggested, this role and behaviour he's stuck playing out isn't really him. There is a personality somewhere there behind all this clean-cut blandness. It's been stifled and never given space for expression because competition and being the best comes first ahead of everything in his life. Andrew's transformation comes as a freeing up of this stifled person within, breaking out of his cage. And similar to Alison's symbolic transformation from black to white in her clothing, we see Andrew peel off his symbolic layers to reveal himself. The hoodie, then the jumper until he's down to his vest. This peeling off of layers comes to him at the moment after he's smoked weed, which isn't surprising. Whatever your opinion on drugs, it's hard to argue they don't represent kind of just letting go for a bit. Letting go is something Andrew has never been given space to do in his life because it's all about intensity, fighting, winning everything, training hard. So to actually let go for once in his life becomes liberating. Imagine a caged animal suddenly being allowed to run free, to not worry, to not care. It runs euphorically all over the place in a mad sort of freedom. That's Andrew here. And I should say, interestingly, this expression of his freedom here still shows off his athletic side and his gymnastic skills and all of that, because he is still a sporty person. Maybe sport stifles him and suppresses the person beneath, but it is still part of him. He probably does still like sport and feel proud of his athletic side. So this dance of freedom here still shows off the sporty side. Only here we see it's not rigid, focused athleticism, strength and speed utilised like a machine solely for the racetrack, but instead it's strength and speed let loose to express emotion. Anyway, this is just a clear symbolic moment of his freedom. A lot of Andrew's change actually comes before this moment and comes largely through this power struggle he has with Bender. We can assume Andrew pretty much always wins in his competitions. The only time he ever loses is at home when compared against his father. His dad is the strong one that makes Andrew feel weak and helpless there. As Andrew later points out, he feels his dad is disappointed in him.
Got the feeling that he was disappointed that I never cut loose on anyone, right?
Andrew's one clear experience of being a weak loser is as a son to a father that he can never please. And that makes him feel horrible. So, in a sense, not only does his dad constantly tell him, making him believe that losing is totally unacceptable and horrible and a fate worse than death, but he also feels that because being a loser beneath his dad does feel horrible and like a fate worse than death. I might not have explained that well, but we'll come back to it later with a good example, so don't worry too much yet. The point is, Andrew's only experience of failure is as something beyond awful, something so unbearable. But in Andrew's power struggle with Bender, Andrew loses there. Not only does Bender get Claire at the end of the film, not only does Andrew fail to get Bender to do the right thing so he sees it, but Bender also firmly establishes himself as group leader and sways Andrew into behaving more like Bender does. most notably in smoking weed. So Andrew faces defeat here, but you know what? It's not humiliating. No one rubs it in his face or makes him feel pathetic about it. Failure, this thing he's been told is pretty much the end of the world, actually turns out not to be the end of the world, you know? No one treats him any differently, not even Bender, because Bender doesn't play up to the role of tyrant who makes Andrew feel weak and pathetic for losing. Instead, Bender plays the role of an actual leader who, I mean, despite his insults, does pretty much get on with everybody. He wants them to share his weed, he wants to talk with them, he even sacrifices himself so they don't get in trouble for leaving the room.
Get back to the library. Keep doing it on.
This is an experience of interacting with someone without it being built around one person playing the winner and the other the loser, you know? There are other ways we can interact. That in itself is a revelation for Andrew, you know, despite what Dad's told me, not everything has to be a competition. I've lost here and it doesn't matter whatsoever. And similarly, Andrew started the film thinking Bender was a loser who might as well not even exist. But if he's such a loser, how does he become leader of the group? How come Andrew himself ends up following Bender, quite literally following him to his locker?
This is so stupid. Why do you think... Why are we risking getting caught? I don't know. So then what are we doing? You ask me one more question and I'm beating the shit out of you.
That's another lesson. Not everything is about success, because Bender may not be a success at school, but he's clearly got good traits I must admire if I've agreed to follow him. And if there's one good trait Bender does have, it's free will. Freedom in a way Andrew doesn't. And so in accepting to follow Bender and come under his banner of freedom, Andrew smokes weed, lets himself go, and feels liberated for probably the first time in his life. You know, so the lesson there, maybe the world isn't as straightforward as winners and losers. Maybe everyone's a bit of both, you know, maybe Bender, who I thought was just some loser, actually has a lot I could learn from. Anyway, we're going to take things a bit further now and talk about abuse. And we're going to do it through a discussion on
Taped Larry Lester's buns together.
why does Andrew do it? If he's all caught up in doing the right thing and being clean cut, why does he do a thing that he himself describes as torture? In part he tells us exactly why he did it.
I did it for my old man. I tortured this poor kid because I wanted him to think that I was cool. He's always going off about, you know, when he was in school, all the wild things he used to do. And I got the feeling that he was disappointed that I never cut loose on anyone, right?
Well, firstly, this in no way contradicts Andrew's do the right thing approach to life, because that whole approach came from attempting to please and live up to his father in the first place. If bullying someone also pleases his father, then that's kind of also doing the right thing in a warped way. You know, as his dad even says, there was nothing wrong in what Andrew did, simply that he got caught. So, anyway, in part, Andrew explains why he did it quite clearly. My dad wants me to be a winner, so I'll train to be a winner. And if my dad wants me to be cool, I'll bully someone to look cool. The tragic part, of course, there being that Andrew has never stopped to consider what he himself wants, or at least what he wants beyond just seeking his dad's approval. There's a lot more to understand about why Andrew does it though, and we're going to start by saying that Andrew has clearly suffered psychological or emotional abuse under his father. He's been taught to feel weak and pathetic and humiliated whenever he doesn't win at anything. I mean, God knows how hard that must have been, particularly when Andrew was still a little kid. Imagine how that must have been. And like I talked about with Will in the first Good Will Hunting video I did, people who suffer abuse can often get stuck in seeing all relationships that way. Because the pattern plays out again, the pattern he's been taught. One person is the abused, Andrew, made to feel weak and humiliated and pathetic, and the other is the abuser, his dad. See how that pattern fits with the winner-loser mentality as well. There's always the winner and the loser, the strong and the weak, the abuser and the abused. That's it. There's no other way of interaction. And if that's what Andrew's been taught, and those are the only two options in a relationship, then it's all about survival. Out of the two, you would rather play the role of the abuser, because then at least you're not the one suffering. You have to keep the other pushed down, or they'll push you down. Andrew then is terrified of being made to feel abused and weak and humiliated in all the ways his dad makes him feel at home. So he has to push all those feelings onto someone else even weaker. Make them feel like the weak ones so that he can feel strong. Hence bullying Larry Lester, hence wanting to win wrestling in general, and Even that scathing remark he makes of Medda, you might as well not even exist. This is kind of what you'd call projection, in that you're projecting how you feel into someone else. But we can also go further. What's interesting about the stuff Andrew says here is to pinpoint exactly the moment before he attacked Larry Lester.
And Larry's undressing a couple lockers down from me. And he's kind of skinny, weak. And I started thinking about my father and his attitude about weakness. And the next thing I knew, I jumped on top of him and started wailing on him.
So, the thing that sets Andrew off here is seeing how weak Larry is. And then, consequently, that reminds him of his dad's attitude towards weakness. Which means, in part, Andrew is channeling his inner dad here. Repeating that cycle, playing the role of abuser so that someone else can feel weak for once, not just Andrew. But also, in part, it's about releasing anger. Because you can bet Andrew has a hell of a lot of pent-up anger. In fact, we know he's got this volcanic pit of rage deep within him when he says this.
I fucking hate him.
Any anger that's bottled up naturally will explode at some point. Probably at a bad time and against someone who doesn't deserve it. It's not surprising Larry takes it though because of projection. Larry's weak, Andrew feels weak, so he can symbolically kind of relate to Larry, you know. He looks like how I feel. Which means that in attacking Larry, Andrew is kind of attacking this symbol of himself. And that sounds a bit mad, but think about it. Andrew has suffered abuse and hates his dad for that. He admits it here that he hates his dad, but we can sure as hell guarantee he won't admit it to his dad. Because if he did, his dad would crush him, making Andrew feel even more weak and helpless, so he never does truly stand up to his dad. He just does whatever he's told and he doesn't think for himself because he's afraid to stand up to his dad. And Andrew hates himself for that. He hates that he's too afraid to stand up, and that in turn makes him feel even weaker. And he'll beat himself up about that inside. You know, why can't you be stronger? Why can't you stand up? I hate that you're so weak. And so the hatred he should be feeling towards his dad gets warped and redirected back against himself. Which is kind of the tragedy of abuse, really. Sometimes you end up hating yourself for becoming a victim, as though you allowed it to happen, as though it's your fault you became a victim, when really it's not your fault. There's no reason to hate yourself for it. But Andrew does. He hates how weak he feels. And then he sees weak little Larry, and all this suppressed rage and hatred just explodes in the moment. He's beating up Larry the way he beats up himself internally. Larry's like a symbol for his inner weakness, and he gets to punch it into the dirt. And he knows it's wrong. Once the anger subsides, Andrew feels terrible about it because that wasn't right. Larry doesn't deserve it. It's not really Larry he's angry at, it's himself. But Andrew doesn't deserve it either because it's not really himself he should be angry at. It's his dad. But that's the cycle repeating. The abused becomes the abuser, where someone else becomes the abused in his place. It's entirely possible if Andrew had a son that he'd treat him in similar ways. And it's when I think about stuff like this that I remember why I became a counsellor in the first place. People need resolution. They need healing so that the cycle ends and doesn't get repeated again and again, generation after generation. Because there is hope for Andrew. Counselling is just one way to try and help people, but Andrew is given help in this film by the experience of this group. Even before he reveals this story, he's learned through Medda that being a loser doesn't have to mean feeling like the abused. That it can be fine to lose out. You don't have to feel weak and pathetic, and ultimately you can bond with people in ways beyond this abuser-abused pattern. Because I think his bond with Alison at the end shows that. At the start of the film, Andrew would have seen her as this weird loser, similar to the ways he sees Brian, who is someone quite like Larry Lester. They are the two weak, pathetic ones in the group in terms of this school hierarchy. And Claire points out that when they go back to school on Monday, she and Andrew wouldn't want to be friends with either of them.
Oh, be honest, Andy. If Brian came walking up to you in the hall on Monday, what would you do? I mean, picture this, you're there with all the sports. I know exactly what you'd do. You'd say hi to him, and when he left, you'd cut him all up so your friends wouldn't think that you really liked him.
But Andrew clearly changes here. as seen in the fact he starts going out with Alison. She's not some weird loser in his eyes, but someone he respects and cares for, as we can then assume is true of Brian and all of them. Suddenly it's not about winners and losers in Andrew's eyes. It's not about the strong and the weak, the abuser and the abused. There's a different way of interacting with people now. Maybe in the real world the shift wouldn't happen quite so suddenly and easily as it does for him here, but it can still happen. You know, maybe this is the beginning of Andrew's cycle being broken. And if you wanted to simplify that all into a cliche, you can say that in this film, Andrew is taught to make love, not war. Comment your thoughts, your criticism, your reaction, whatever. I'd like to read the comments. And like the video if you liked it. Subscribe if you're new, because I will be doing videos on the other characters too. Thank you for being here either way. Thank you for watching this, and hopefully see you next time.